Hello, we are back here with Command Figures. Today, I want you to picture a map of Europe.
Okay.
You've got Italy on the left, Greece down at the bottom, and right there in the Balkans, sitting on the coast of the Adriatic Sea, is this small, really mountainous country.
Right, Albania.
Yeah, Albania. And if you were looking at this map anytime between, say, 1944 and 1985, you wouldn't just be seeing a country, you'd be seeing a fortress, a literal fortress.
It is definitely one of the most intense examples of isolationism in the entire 20th century. We often talk about the Iron Curtain, but Albania was, it was like a bunker inside the Iron Curtain.
Yeah.
One that eventually just locked the door on the Iron Curtain itself.
That is the perfect way to frame it, because today we are doing a deep dive into the era of Enver Hoxha.
Yes.
This is a guy who started out as a French-educated school teacher, and he ended up building a regime so completely paranoid that they constructed 750,000 concrete bunkers.
Which is a staggering number.
It is. That's one bunker for every 4 citizens.
And our mission for this deep dive isn't just to gawk at the bunkers.
Right.
We want to trace the timeline. Because a country doesn't just wake up one day and decide to cut off the whole world. It was a very specific process.
A journey, really. I mean, they cycled through alliances with all the world's superpowers. First Yugoslavia, then the Soviet Union, then China, before finally deciding
Everyone is a traitor but us.
exactly, we're doing this alone.
And we're pulling this from a really solid stack of sources for you today.
Yes, we are.
We have historical analyses from Cambridge University Press that give us the political timeline, and we have reports on the Sino-Albanian split.
Plus the accounts of their unique state-sponsored atheism.
Right, and even descriptions from the Bunk Art Museums in Tirana, which is where a lot of this history is physically preserved today.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We had to start at the absolute beginning of the regime. It's 1944.
World War II is ending.
Right. The Germans are retreating from the Balkans. Usually when an occupier leaves, it's total chaos. So who steps up?
Enver Hoxha steps up.
And you mentioned earlier he was a school teacher, which is true, but by 1944 he was a hardened partisan commander.
We've been fighting.
Exactly. There was a huge power vacuum, and he was the one ruthless enough to sell it. He managed to unify the communist movement in Albania, which was actually quite fractured at the time, and he eliminated his political rivals very quickly.
But you can't rule a country just by shooting people.
No, you can't.
You need some level of buy-in from the public, right?
Yeah.
At least initially.
Absolutely. And he had it.
Okay.
This is a really crucial piece of context that our sources highlight, which often gets missed.
What's that?
In 1945, Hoxha passed the Agrarian Reform Law.
Right.
Because before this, Albania was almost medieval in its social structure. You had these feudal lords called beys who owned almost all of the arable land.
So most people were just working land they didn't own.
Right. Hoxha comes in, confiscates all that land from the beys, and hands it directly to the peasants.
Wow. So if you're a poor farmer who has been working someone else's land for generations, suddenly this guy gives you the deed to your own farm.
To them, he must have looked like a savior.
He did. He was breaking a centuries-old feudal system, and that bought him a massive amount of political capital early on.
But geographically speaking, Albania is tiny.
Very small.
They couldn't just stand alone in 1945. They had a very large, very powerful neighbor right next door in Yugoslavia.
Josip Broz Tito's Yugoslavia.
Right.
And for the first few years, from about 1944 to 1948, Albania was essentially a satellite state of Yugoslavia.
Just completely linked.
Their economies were linked, their militaries were linked. But this relationship was incredibly tense behind the scenes.
Because Tito had bigger plans than just being friendly neighbors, didn't he?
He did. Tito envisioned a Balkan Federation. He basically wanted to absorb Albania.
Just turn it into another province.
Effectively turning it into the 7th Republic of Yugoslavia, yeah.
So Hoxha's sitting there thinking, I just fought a brutal war to get the Italians and Germans out, and now I'm about to be swallowed whole by the Yugoslavs.
It was an existential threat. Hoxha knew that if that federation happened, his career and probably his life was over.
He needed a way out.
He needed a bigger protector to scare off the bully next door.
And in 1948, the geopolitical gods just smiled on him.
They really did. Stalin and Tito had their famous split.
Oh, right.
Stalin kicked Yugoslavia out of the Cominform, which was the international organization of communist parties.
It was basically excommunication from the Church of Communism.
That is exactly what it was.
And Hoxha doesn't hesitate.
Not for a single second. He immediately pivots. He sides with Stalin, the distant emperor, against Tito, the neighbor.
Very smart.
He creates this narrative that Tito is a traitor to the cause and that Albania is the one true loyal student of Stalin.
This establishes the pattern for the whole regime, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, ideology wasn't just a belief system for them.
No, it was a shield. It was a survival mechanism. By being the most rigid Stalinist country in the world, Hoxha guaranteed that the Soviet Union would protect him from Yugoslavia.
So this kicks off what we might call the golden era of Albanian communism, if you can call it that.
Yeah, from 1948 to roughly 1961, they are Moscow's best friend in the Mediterranean.
And Moscow paid well for that friendship.
They paid extremely well. Between 1948 and 1960, the Soviets pumped in about $200 million in aid.
Which is huge.
A huge amount for a country of that size. They built factories, they electrified the country, they built roads.
But the Soviets weren't doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. What was the return on investment for Moscow?
Real estate. Specifically, the Vlorë submarine base.
Oh, okay.
This was the real prize. It gave the Soviet Union a warm water port in the Mediterranean. From Vlorë, Soviet submarines could patrol the Adriatic and be within striking distance of Italy and the U.S. Sixth Fleet.
That is massive. It's a total strategic choke point.
It was arguably one of Stalin's biggest strategic wins in Europe.
But then, the one thing happens that no dictator can control.
Stalin dies.
Right. Stalin dies in 1953. And this is where the story starts to get really wild. How does Hoxha react to the news?
He goes completely overboard. He declares 14 days of national mourning.
14 days.
Yes. Just for context, the Soviet Union itself didn't even mourn that long.
Wow.
He gathered the population in the main square of Tirana to swear an oath of eternal fidelity to their beloved father, Stalin.
He's completely tying his entire legitimacy to a dead man.
Which was a really dangerous bet, because in Moscow, Nikita Khrushchev takes over.
And Khrushchev wants to change things.
He starts de-Stalinization. He gives the secret speech exposing Stalin's crimes, the purges, the gulags.
Right.
He starts opening up to the West a little bit, and crucially, he starts repairing the relationship with Tito.
And for Hoxha, every single one of those things is an absolute nightmare.
It's a catastrophe. Think about it.
Yeah.
If Stalin was a monster, then Hoxha is a monster because he copied Stalin's playbook page for page.
Exactly.
And if Moscow is friends with Tito again, then Albania is back on the menu for Yugoslavia.
So Hoxha starts throwing around this word that we see in the source documents a lot, revisionism.
Yeah.
Can we pause on that for a second? What does he actually mean when he calls Khrushchev a revisionist?
In the context of hardline Marxism, revisionism is the ultimate insult.
Okay.
It means you are watering down the revolutionary truth. You are compromising with capitalism. To Hoxha, Khrushchev wasn't just changing policy, he was a heretic.
He was betraying the true faith.
Exactly.
So the relationship crumbles. I read that during a drought in Albania, the Soviets actually refused to send grain, like to try and starve Hoxha into submission.
That's right. It got incredibly petty and dangerous. The Soviets cut off aid, they recalled their technicians, and it all culminates in 1961 with the showdown at the Vlorë submarine base.
This story blows my mind. This is a tiny country going toe-to-toe with a nuclear superpower.
It sounds like pure fiction. When the alliance officially broke, the Soviets naturally demanded their submarines back. They wanted to pack up the base and leave.
It makes sense.
But Hoxha said, no, the base is on Albanian soil. The treaty says these assets belong to us.
Well, he tried to repo the Soviet Navy.
He succeeded. There was a massive standoff. The Albanians actually seized several of the submarines that were docked there.
That is insane.
The Soviets, not wanting to start a literal shooting war over a few subs, eventually withdrew their personnel and the remaining ships. But Hoxha kept 4 Soviet Whiskey-class submarines.
That brings a whole new meaning to hostile takeover.
It really does.
So let's look at where we are. He's burned the bridge with Yugoslavia. Now he's hijacked submarines and burned the bridge with the Soviet Union. He's kicked out of the Warsaw Pact.
Yeah.
Albania is completely alone in Europe.
In Europe, yes, but not in the world. Because across the globe, there was someone else who hated Khrushchev's revisionism just as much as Hoxha did.
Mao Zedong.
Right. The People's Republic of China. This is the my enemy's enemy is my friend phase.
Yeah, it has to be the strangest alliance of the Cold War.
Oh, absolutely. You have this massive Asian power and this tiny Balkan state with nothing in common culturally or linguistically becoming best friends.
So China steps in to pay the bills.
They do. They replaced the Soviet aid, they sent technicians, they sent tractors, they sent grain.
Okay.
But they also sent ideas. And this is where life in Albania takes a turn from merely repressive to a totalitarian nightmare.
You're talking about the Cultural Revolution.
Yes. Hoxha saw what Mao was doing in China, destroying the old culture to build a new communist one, and he thought, we need that here.
Wow.
In 1967, he issued a decree that made Albania the world's first constitutionally atheist state.
I want to be clear on this for anyone listening. Other communist countries were anti-religious, right?
Yeah.
The Soviets didn't exactly like the church, but this was different.
Very different. In the Soviet Union, the church was suppressed, but it still existed underground, or in a heavily controlled way.
Right.
In Albania, they tried to physically exterminate the very concept of God. The sources note that 2,169 churches, mosques, and monasteries were either demolished or converted.
Converted into what?
Warehouses, gymnasiums, movie theaters. The main cathedral in Shkodër actually became a sports hall.
And the punishment for practicing religion?
Draconian. You could get 10 years in a labor camp just for possessing a Bible or a Quran.
10 years.
Yes, but it went deeper than just physical objects. It went to personal identity. Parents were forbidden from giving their children names with any religious connotation.
Really? So no Matthews or Mohammeds?
Exactly. No Matthews, no Davids, no Peters.
So if you're a parent having a baby, what do? You have to pick from a government-approved list.
Yes. They issued a dictionary of Illyrian or purely secular names. If the name wasn't on the list, you simply couldn't register your child. They were actively trying to erase the cultural memory of the nation.
It wasn't just religion, though, was it? It was anything considered foreign. I read about the hair and beard ban.
This was in the 1970s. Hoxha decided that long hair, beards, and jazz music were foreign influences and signs of bourgeois degeneration.
So they were banned.
Completely banned.
And there's that famous story about the Celtic football team in the sources?
That story really highlights the absurdity of it all. Celtic FC, the Scottish team, flew into Tirana for a European Cup match in 1979.
Right.
And a lot of players had 70s-style long hair and beards. The Albanian customs officers literally stopped them on the tarmac.
Just a total you shall not pass moment.
Basically, yeah. They told them they couldn't enter the country looking like that.
So what happened?
The team management had to scramble to find scissors and razors. The players were getting haircuts in the airport terminal just so they could go play a soccer game.
That is funny in retrospect, but it really shows the terrifying level of micromanagement. The state was watching your hair.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the Sigurimi.
The secret police. And this is the dark undercurrent of everything we've discussed so far.
Yeah.
The Sigurimi didn't just watch you, they recruited you. The goal was to break down trust so completely that no one could ever organize a resistance.
The sources mentioned that children were actually encouraged to inform on their own parents.
That was the ultimate goal of the state, to replace the family unit with total loyalty to the party. If you said something critical of the bread shortage at the dinner table and your child mentioned it at school the next day, the Sigurimi would know.
It created a society where you had to wear a mask 24 hours a day, even inside your own home.
Absolutely.
And as this paranoia ramps up internally, the external paranoia is manifesting physically. We have to talk about the bunkers.
The bunkerization. This is the enduring image of Hoxha's Albania. Starting in the late 60s and continuing right through the 80s, they poured concrete into the earth like it was water.
750,000 bunkers. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the pure logistics of that.
It's astronomical. And these weren't massive underground command centers for the most part.
Where were they?
Most of them were small, mushroom-shaped pillboxes, big enough for maybe 1 or 2 soldiers. They were prefabricated and planted everywhere.
Everywhere.
In vineyards, on beaches, in cemeteries, even on the playgrounds of apartment blocks.
But why? I mean, did he really think an invasion was coming?
That's the big question. Hoxha preached this doctrine of popular defense. He told the people they were under constant threat from both the American imperialists and the Soviet social imperialists.
Though we were on.
He convinced them they were entirely surrounded.
So the bunkers were essentially a psychological tool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Militarily, they were highly dubious.
Right. In a modern war with airstrikes, a concrete pillbox on a beach is just a target.
Exactly. But psychologically, if you see a bunker every time you walk out your front door, you are constantly reminded, the enemy is coming, we are under siege, only the party can protect you.
It militarized the daily life of every single citizen.
It did.
And the cost, I mean, Albania wasn't a rich country.
The cost was a disaster. The concrete and steel used for these bunkers could have solved Albania's housing crisis 3 times over. could have built roads and hospitals.
Instead, it was buried in the dirt to protect against an invasion that never came.
Exactly.
So we've gone from Yugoslavia to the Soviets to China. But by the late 70s, even the China relationship is getting rocky, right?
Yes, because China changed.
How so?
President Nixon visited Beijing in 1972. Mao died in 1976. China started opening up to the world.
And just like with the Soviets, Hoxha saw this as a betrayal.
He did. He started openly criticizing China.
He bit the hand that fed him. Again.
He really did. And this time, there was no one left to turn to. In 1978, China cut off all aid.
Wow.
And Albania entered its final, most tragic phase. Total isolation.
This is the period of autarky, self-reliance.
Yes. Hoxha famously said that Albanians would eat grass rather than accept aid from the West or the revisionist East.
And they almost did.
They did. The economy completely collapsed. They refused foreign loans. They refused trade deals. Technology just froze in time.
What did that actually look like for a regular person walking down the street in Tirana in, say, 1982?
It looked like the 1950s. The cars were old Soviet or Chinese models kept running with scrap metal. There were intense shortages of everything: milk, meat, coffee.
Just the basics.
People spent hours in queues just to get basic staples. It was a gray, crumbling existence.
And as the country is starving, the paranoia at the top reaches a fever pitch.
It really does.
We need to talk about the Mehmet Shehu incident, because I think this sums up the madness of the regime perfectly.
Mehmet Shehu was the prime minister. He had been by Hoxha's side since the war. For 4 years, he was the number 2 in the country.
The iron fist to Hoxha's. Iron fist.
Exactly.
And then in 1981, he's dead.
Yes. The regime announced it was suicide. They said he had a nervous crisis.
But the reality?
The reality is almost certainly that he was purged. There are theories that he suggested opening up trade with the West just a little bit to save the economy, and Hoxha snapped.
But it's the aftermath that is so wild. How did Hoxha spin this to the public?
This is where the paranoia goes entirely off the charts. Hoxha posthumously denounced his closest friend of 40 years as a super spy.
Right.
He claimed that Shehu had been working for the CIA, the KGB, and the Yugoslav Secret Service, all at the very same time.
That is physically impossible. You cannot be a triple agent for enemies who all hate each other.
It's completely absurd. But it didn't matter. In a totalitarian system, the truth is whatever the leader says it is.
It really shows that by the end, Hoxha trusted absolutely no one. He was cannibalizing his own regime.
Yes, he was.
And he didn't have much time left himself.
No. Enver Hoxha died in April 1985.
You'd think there would be relief in the street.
There was mostly fear. The people had been traumatized for so long, they really didn't know what would happen next.
Who took over?
His successor, Ramiz Alia, took over a country that was the poorest in Europe, deeply malnourished and psychologically terrified.
It took another 5 or 6 years for the system to finally fall, right?
Yes, until the early 90s, when the students finally rose up and the statues were toppled.
But the legacy, that's harder to top.
Much harder.
When you look at the whole timeline for this deep dive, from the early hope of land reform to the sheer insanity of the bunkers, what's the real takeaway here?
I think the tragedy is the waste. Hoxha was completely obsessed with independence, and he achieved it. Albania was never absorbed by Yugoslavia or the Soviet Union.
Right.
But the price of that independence was the imprisonment of his own people. He treated the entire country like his personal property just to be walled off from the world.
It brings us back to that map we started with. A fortress protects you, but it also confines you.
Exactly. And the psychological scars of that confinement, the lost years, the broken trust between neighbors, those take much longer to heal than just demolishing the concrete bunkers.
That leaves us with a provocative thought for you to explore on your own. When a leader claims that total isolation is the only way to protect a nation's sovereignty, what are they really protecting? The country? Or just their own grip on power? What does absolute independence actually cost?
It is a heavy history, but an essential one to understand when we look at how authoritarianism functions.
Thank you for listening. Do not forget to click like and subscribe and write your opinion in the comments section.